Вітайте на цій сцені Анна Франца, португальська журналістка, яка написала книжку про власні досвіди дослідження України під час війни. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for coming. Yes, you can sit here. Так, зараз до нас приєднується українська журналістка та письменниця, авторка книжки «Наші, інші» Олеся Яремчук. Пані Олесю. Дякую вам. Та караїмський активіст, митець Езра Пастор. Це ви малюєте ці футболки! Я вас знайшла! І модеруватиме цю панельну дискусію історик, викладач Київської школи економіки Андрій Ферт. Пане Андрію, починаємо розмову про погляд ззовні. Писати про інші культури попри відстань і стереотипи.
Hello. I will be tormenting you with English, but probably you already have your headphones, so you will be having a translation, so stick to it. And I am, yes, it works, it works. Yeah.
Does it? Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it works.
It does.
Shall we try
Yes.
your?
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
Perfect.
great. Then we all set. So this section that we have today is titled "Outsider's Gaze: How to Write About Other Cultures Without Prejudice, in spite of prejudices, in spite of stereotypes, in spite of distances." And outsider's gaze is like it might be a very good tool to explore other cultures, because when they have an outsider, he could easily spot some blank spots that we have to see something that for us, insiders, goes without saying, something we don't understand, don't see, don't recognize. It might be a very good tool. But at the same time, outsiders, if not properly educated, properly prepared, could bring like a lot of like misunderstanding and reinforce existing stereotypes, existing prejudices, etc. So what I'd like to discuss today with you is this dangers that outsiders look might have. Because my guests today at this panel, they all deal with this outsider's gaze in one way or another. So we have a journalist from Portugal who writes about Ukraine, being Portugal and don't speak Ukrainian at the same time. So see, she is clearly an outsider who tries to study Ukraine. And we have two fantastic people from Ukraine who studies national minorities, either by studying and exploring different cultures that we have in Ukraine, or like being an activist trying to promote some minority that is being considered by the public discourse as being other. So like I said, I'd like to focus on this. Damages, possible challenges that the outsider's view, outsider's gaze might present. And I'd like to start with our guest from Portugal, with Anna. I'm sorry for that. You are the best English speaker of us all, so probably this is the obvious choice. And my question would be, because like I said, it's essential to be properly prepared to study some other cultures. And I'd like you to try to reflect about this prior knowledge of Ukraine that you have before you came, before you started actual field work there. So how do you obtain this knowledge, and how this knowledge helped you to study Ukraine while you were there in the first months of invasion?
Thank you so much for your question. Thanks everyone that is here. Unfortunately, I cannot say that I already knew quite a lot about Ukraine before the war started. And in that respect, I am very much like a lot of, or most Portuguese people. It is a country that is really far away. Of course, we should all know more about any country, but it was not the case when the war started. I was on holiday in Italy when the war started, but because I had been covering the back and forth of the Russian tanks in the border, they asked me if I wanted to go. I did, and of course, because I've been since 2021 writing about why this might happen, I knew a bit of history between the two countries, but not enough, I think, to destroy stereotypes. So I think the first thing I did was try to read history books of writers that are translated into English, but they are Ukrainian. Sergei Plokhy, does that make any sense? Okay. So he's translated into Portuguese and into English. So I read that on the way from Trieste to Lviv, which of course took 24 hours, so I was able to read a bit. That helped me destroy some stereotypes that I think, unfortunately, still remain in Europe, which the main of which is that Ukraine shares culture with Russia. That is something that a lot of people still think, I think, in Europe, that you have like your past is almost all the same. So you share the language, you share the literature, you share the ballet or theater. So I kind of had to read to realize that a lot of it is prior to any Russian interference. So you had your culture, your literature before. So I think that's the first important thing. If you cannot be in the country, at least read Ukrainian thinkers, authors about Ukraine. In the beginning of the new millennium, I don't know, many of you might know this, a lot of Ukrainians and also people from Moldavia, from Georgia, I believe probably from Russia too, they immigrated to Portugal because there was a construction boom, yeah? So these people, so the first problem that I think stereotypes arise from indifference and ignorance. The local population does not understand or want to understand sometimes Ukrainians that migrate to the country, of course, because they have their own lives to go on about and everything. For the Portuguese population, it's understandable. But then also it creates stereotypes because Ukrainians and Moldavians and Georgians, they were doing professions which are not considered qualified. So now, sometimes, not anymore, but in Portugal, mothers would go into a construction site and they would say, look, if you don't study, you're going to be a Ukrainian. Which then I found out that one lady working as a house cleaner in one of my friend's house, she was a nuclear physicist. So, I mean, I don't think we even have nuclear physicists in Portugal. So then I realized that, of course, they had all sorts of amazing professions, just as qualified as any Norwegian, English, French that we associate with good studies. And then I started to dissolve that one stereotype, and that's, I guess, how it happens. In journalism, however, you do not have the luxury of not reading more. If you're a normal citizen, you have. You go on with your life, you get your job, your kids, and you don't need to know about other cultures if you don't want to. But if I don't read about other cultures, in my writing I will perpetuate things that are not true. So I guess that is the first thing as a journalist you need to know. There's always, you need to take care that narratives were imposed on you by a stronger country, like a colonializing country. Like, I don't know, people still think about Mozambique in Portugal. It was a previous colony because Portuguese writers wrote about it, not Mozambican writers. So what we know about Mozambique is through our lens, which we were an occupying force. And it's not fair on the Mozambican culture. They, of course, need to tell their own stories. Through me, I try to bring Ukrainian stories in Portuguese to Portugal. And I'm so sorry that now newspapers don't have a lot of money or everyone is cutting costs, because without going to the places, you really have no idea what people think. You can read quite a lot, but it's not the same. So I think for media houses, if you really want good journalism or journalism maybe as freer of stereotypes as possible, you should send your reporters to the places. Like an example, before I went to Palestine, I didn't know that most people had quite a relaxed approach to religion. They were not covered up, the girls, they were hanging out with their friends, male friends. So before that, I thought they would be a lot more conservative in Palestine, which they're not. I had no idea. So that helps me explain why there's now so much people that are not really some fans of Hamas, because they were never really fans of that particular type of very conservative religion. And that's something you can only know by going and seeing people not wearing anything on their heads. So, okay, apparently, you know, they are not as conservative as media in Portugal tell me that they are. I will leave it at that. I have a few other examples, but I really want to hear my colleagues in the panel.
Yeah, we will get back to those examples because they're fantastically interesting. Thank you for raising this issue of colonialism, how colonial powers impose their vision on the world that is not part of these colonial powers. And my next question is to you, Olesia, because you basically wrote about the national minorities within Ukraine, and sometimes it appears to me that we have an internal colonialism in Ukraine in regards to those national minorities that we have. So is it a case, and when you collected stories for your book, have you encountered that sort of attitude that those people, those other cultures, other nations, other ethnicities that live in Ukraine are not like ours, are not Ukrainians, are something else, and probably we don't need to study them? Something like that.
Okay, thank you so much for invitation and the chance to speak today with you. And maybe I would like to start with, I will explain the short background of the story, yes? That this project I started in 2016, it means 8 years ago, and I covered 11,000 kilometers across Ukraine to visit those settlements, to document stories of those people. And in 2018, the book was published, and then it was translated in a couple of languages. And now I'm trying to follow this topic and record new stories, especially of those national minorities which are now at risk. For example, Greeks of Mariupol, Meskhetian Turks of Bakhmut, or other national communities. And I think, regarding your question, I wouldn't say that we have this colonial attitude, because, in my case, I felt that, the first thing, that not a lot of our national minorities and communities, they are so assimilated, I would say. And they speak Ukrainian or Russian or other languages, but mostly I wouldn't say that they have different culture. And that's why, but there are other cases, for example, about Crimean Tatars, which are Muslims, and of course we should accept, we should learn more about this religion and learn more about their culture. And I wouldn't say that we have this colonial attitude. Although I had, sometimes I had this feeling when I was talking to other people, that there is some barrier between us. Although we speak in Ukrainian and Russian or whatever, or in mixture of languages, but mostly we understood each other well. But nevertheless, sometimes I felt that I don't get this background which they have. They context, their story. I can. I'm trying to immerse in this atmosphere. I'm trying to immerse to the life of these national communities. But nevertheless, I'm more the I'm as an observer. Yes, from the. I'm trying to write about this from the beginning, but nevertheless, it's complicated to understand everything completely, 100%. And actually, I was really criticized in Europe regarding this title of the book, Our Others. They said that like, I'm trying to make those people like as an alien others, but actually it was, my purpose was completely opposite. I tried to show that like we are different, we have those differences, but we are like, we have this unity, diversity in unity, and they are others, but not alien. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice that you said that, because I remember I have a very, well, troubling conversation with one history teacher. I was promoting a textbook for him to use, which called Україна багатокультурна, Ukrainian multicultural. And he basically responded that I don't need that, because by promoting other cultures, you squeeze Ukrainians out of the Ukrainian history, and that should not be made, because it's very, very profound wrong. Obviously, it's a wrong attitude, but still that exists, unfortunately. And consequently, the next question is to Ezra, is about the, Olesa already mentioned she have not encountered that in internal colonialism in the attitudes of this dominant discourse toward these national minorities. You are not simply somebody who studies national minority, but you also actively promote this other culture. Have you encountered something like that?
Well, I'd love to kick off with the fact that we're not even a national minority. We are the indigenous people of Ukraine, accordingly to the UN Charter since 2021. It can be the first bullet points of, I would say, post-colonialism in Ukraine, internal. But well, throughout my life, I've encountered, well, let's put it that way, different opinions about what, for example, Crimean Tatars and Karyd people have to do with Crimea, and if there is even something to do with Crimea, with Crimean Tatars, for example, because if you look into the comment section of any Crimean Tatar activist right now in Ukraine, you'll see, I mean, like 50-50 comments, and where the half of them support us and say, yeah, go get it, baby. And the half of them say, never. Crimea belongs to Ukraine. Crimean region is a part of Ukraine. There is no autonomy for you in the future. Just never. You ain't never gonna get it. We don't like you guys. Just go under the rock or something. So, yeah, if I put it shortly, I have encountered such instances, but well, the majority is supportive, let's put it that way. But the problem is there. We cannot ignore it still, because we'll have to work with it in future, and as quickly we make this problem disappear, start working on making this problem disappear right now, the less we'll have to work on it in the future, when hopefully Crimea will be free.
Yeah, thank you, hopefully. Let's hope for this. My question to all of you is that some of you mentioned this problem with languages, with understanding what other people trying to tell us. And my question to you all, because probably you to some extent dealt with this problem, is the question of intermediary, the question about the translator, about the constraints that you are being put to because of a translator, because you cannot understand what other people speak, what national minorities or indigenous people speak, and you have to use a translator, and how those constraints, how you work with them, how you try to avoid those constraints, how you try to reflect on that if your translator translating something in right way or not, something like that.
I probably can, you speak some form of the language that you work with. I don't at all. So I always had to trust translators to a huge degree, to, in some places, to order coffee or get a SIM card. So imagine talking about war, feelings, trauma. I've had amazing translators. They've become, of course, people that also helped me with everything, not only my work. They transported me everywhere and talked during the nights, you know, about how it is to be in a war zone. But you are completely dependent on what your translator tells you. And there was this episode in Liman in the east where I was speaking to a gentleman that lived underground, as most people lived back then. And he was saying that he doesn't care if it's NATO or Europe or whatever, he just wants everyone to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, because otherwise the other guys would also not stop. So my official translator did not translate this, but there was another guy with him that was just accompanying him just to see whether he could become eventually also a translator with media. And it was him at nighttime in the hotel when he dropped me off that said, look, this is what the gentleman said. He's concerned that war will not stop unless also Europe stops helping Ukraine and sending weapons. I realize this is not at all a popular opinion in Ukraine, because of course your national communication is on the contrary. You need to help us, you need to send weapons. But as a journalist, I am not concerned with that. I am concerned with the truth that that man felt. So for me, not having that sentence, not printing that sentence, because I was very close to not knowing that sentence, would be like a disservice to my readers, because they would know less about Ukraine if they didn't know that there are some people that are not okay with NATO sending weapons. That is also a part of your country. Probably not great to know that there's these people that don't want help, but there are. So that's one example of a story that I would not have had if it wasn't for this other guy that thought it was fair to say this. The problem is, with stereotyping, if people tell you that they wish NATO would not send as many weapons, they would immediately maybe label this gentleman as pro-Russian, which is not necessarily the case. I cannot say that someone that does not want more weapons falling on their houses is necessarily pro-Russian. And as a journalist, I cannot write that. So he says that point, and I don't have to elaborate after. That's what he said. I cannot say that he's pro-Russian because he lives in the East. I cannot say that. It's not really a fair assessment. Maybe he is. I don't know, you know. That's for him to say to his friends or to whomever he wants. Perhaps he's just tired of bombs, as everyone else, but feels Ukrainian. He did say that he's Ukrainian and wants to live in Ukraine, so he just doesn't want war. That's all, I guess.
Yeah, so the understanding of a context is extremely important in this case. Olesya, I remember in your book, I guess it was part about Tsihani, that you mentioned something about Oromi. There were two words interchangeably used. You mentioned something about about you being reliant on a translator because you didn't understand properly what those people were talking about. So the personality of a translator and the stereotypes that a translator might have, how do you dealt with that when you studied that, when you collected stories for your book?
Thank you so much. As I said before, like mostly I used Ukrainian and Russian language. It was like till 2018, because now I would say that we will choose Ukrainian language, not Russian. But at that time, we used this mixture of languages, and that was fine for both of us. And I would say that. Of course, maybe somewhere there were some obstacles, yeah, that I can't translate something, but mostly we were able to comprehend each other well. And if, in this case, I actually don't remember what you were talking about, maybe about Roma of Touretsk or something like that. And of course, there was a woman which helped me to communicate with those people. They spoke Russian in general, but they could have some words which I can understand. And I wouldn't say that I have problems with language. Maybe, of course, it was a challenge to communicate with Hungarians in small village because they don't speak well. But nevertheless, our conversation was successful. So yes, that's my statement, and I think. I love other cultures and other languages, and I would love to learn more about all languages which we use in Ukraine, not only Ukrainian and Russian, but also Crimean Tatar, Greek languages, Polish, Czech languages, Romanian, Hungarian, and so on. And I'm on the way to learn, to learn more. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very hard work and very hard undertaken, and good luck with that. That sound was the Pes Patron balloon exploded, so everything is all right at the moment. Next question to Ezra is about this issue that we mentioned earlier. How to promote, because you're an activist promoting specific culture, and how to promote a culture that is not mainstream culture without exoticizing them. Because there is an issue with many representations of indigenous population, indigenous people, and national minorities when people tend to exoticize them in a very poor sense. So like Ukrainians were exoticized, for example, in the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire. So how to avoid that from your experience?
Well, looking back at my experience, I would say that nowadays, you cannot promote the culture, like distilled, clean culture that you know and that has been around for hundreds and thousands even years, because now is era of Instagram, now is era of TikTok, of fast content, of clip thinking. Unfortunately, there is also you always have to find some compromise with the reality. There is the content, for example, I want to share about our culture, but I have to make some bullet points to make it a bit easier, a bit shorter, a bit faster, because I mainly promote our culture in Instagram and TikTok, for example, and when people scroll TikTok, they don't want to hear a 2-hour lecture about some people from Crimea they have never heard of before. So you have to work on the structure. You have to cut off some angles. You have to make it more acceptable for today, unfortunately. But I look at it as one of the first steps, because what I do about our culture, I laid some basis. Because please raise your hands who knows who are carried people at all. Not a lot. You see, and for example, we're not even, in Ukrainian, we're not called carried people, we're called karayimi, with the M at the end. Yeah, there's the hand. Yep, but in English and other languages, we're called carried with the T letter because of some interlinguistic shenanigans, I guess. So you always have to make the information more approachable. You have to sugarcoat it, I guess. So maybe it will bring some consequences later on, like 50 years later, maybe 100 years later. But for me, my main priority right now is to sustain the fact that we exist, because there's not a lot of us left, and I just, well, unfortunately, maybe I'm the only one of the carrieds who tell about carried people for some media levels. So of course, I have to find some compromises and sugarcoat it in the information.
You said, unfortunately, to adapt to the existing reality. Why unfortunately? Because cultures are always changing, transforming, evolving.
Yeah, but culture can change and may change throughout the centuries, but the problem right now with carried people and carried culture that almost nobody knows about our culture. The majority of information about carried people is oversimplified to the level that people can say that carried people are just Crimean Jews, which is not true. First of all, I say unfortunately because people do not even know the basis, what was before. So I have to exaggerate some facts. I have to, again, I have to cut out some angles, some rough patches, but I have to make it more, I have to make it prettier, just so it lives.
To make it prettier. That sounds interesting and challenging once again in this issue of representation. The question is to all of you is what drives you to study some other cultures? Not to you, obviously, because I know you already answered that, but to you too. So you dedicated so much time to studying Ukraine, you dedicated so much time to studying and collecting stories about many other ethnicities that live in Ukraine. So what is your drive? What makes you want to do this? What is the idea behind this?
I was just curious. I mean, it's like, it's my journalistic work as well, yes? And I don't remember if I mentioned that the idea of this project, I had this idea in the aftermath of the Euromaidan, because there, in this period, we had a lot of grassroots initiatives and a lot of projects, and one of them was the Ukrainians online magazine. And when the editor-in-chief like invited me to start some project, I thought, okay, what do we need now? Like after Euromaidan, after revolution, I thought that we should understand our society more, to comprehend more, and that's why like this was the incentive, the main incentive, and that's why it was like an adventure, I would say, for me, that I started to work on this topic, and I discovered more and more, and that's why I cannot finish this project till now. And may I add something, not only about like this connections to other cultures, but also concerning this topic of language. I remember that sometimes my collocutors, they said, oh, you speak like Western Ukrainian, so to say, because I'm from Lviv, so I have this maybe other type of pronunciation, I don't know. And that's why I understood my like local identity more, because I understood, okay, I have like a little bit different kind of Ukrainian. I didn't mention it before. And that's why I think this project also helped me to understand myself more. Yes, and yes.
Before that, which is curiosity as well for me, it's really interesting, I think, to hear someone say that you need to oversimplify your culture to bring it across. Of course, you've been doing that, so I'm no one to say not to do it, but I wonder what is lost in that oversimplification, the details about your culture that you don't say, or because, I don't know, it's just too complicated and people will detach, you know, you have a short span of attention. And I think there's often a tendency in journalism to create a safe space for audiences. And what it means is that, you know, so your article can easily fit an existing common collective knowledge, you know? So if you say, like, I don't know, Ukraine only became independent in 1991. It's not really a lie, but you erase all other revolutions and things that Ukrainians tried to do before the actual referendum. So this is something that I think happens quite a lot. So you can bring people to your articles and what you produce, you end up not making it less complicated. Especially in a time of Instagram, as you were saying, or TikTok, how can you really go into that period in the 20s where you actually had a state? And I mean, it was 2.5 years or something. People will read, but you will reduce the amount of people which you can maybe capture the attention, because it just becomes too complicated. So it was 1921, when was it? So I think that is a problem that we're dealing with now in media, where everything is kind of like snippets of things and short, I don't know, like, how do you call it? Not incentives, but like everyone consumes things in shorter form, so you need to grab people's attention. I think that's a big topic in this war, because there's, again, as my colleagues here in the panel show, there's quite a lot of layers to Ukrainian identity. So you cannot even say all Ukrainians against Russia or whatever it is. Like, there's all sorts of feelings towards Crimea, what you want it to be in the future, who should it belong to, who should be protected as a minority. So all of these things for a Portuguese audience, they would sound, unfortunately, too dense, too heavy. Like, why am I reading about of course there's always someone that reads, you know, like a very detailed story about a minority in Crimea. But unfortunately, not enough people, and oversimplification is really a problem. So as for my, what drives me, I think curiosity a lot, and also how people act in times of dire, of just struggle. So resistance is something that interests me a lot, and interests me like a resistance through culture as well. So that's the focus of my work here. I come to speak, but I also come as a journalist to understand how culture has grounded or even make people proud again. Kind of, they have forgotten that they had all these amazing writers or poets, and now everyone's buying books again. So that's, for me, the resistance to oppression is something that really interests me, not only in Ukraine, of course, but now more in Ukraine.
Yeah, thank you. So curiosity rules the world. If you want to react to?
Yes, because regarding your first question about like colonialism and anti-colonialism.
Internal colonialism.
Yes, I think that Ukraine is not the state because we wasn't an imperial country or culture, and maybe I should mention that Karaites. It's right pronunciation, correct? Crimean Tatars and Krimchaki as well, they are considered as indigenous people of Crimea, and it was this law was adopted in 2019, if I'm not...
May correct, 2021.
Okay. 21, like yes, before the war, exactly. And then like the work on this topic was like stopped or postponed, I would say. And I think that this new law on national communities / minorities in Ukraine, which was adopted in in the fall of 2023, is like it's a huge step for us, like to work on this topic further. And I really hope that we will not forget also those people of different nationalities which are fighting now, who are fighting now in the armed forces of Ukraine. And I think we should also, after the war, we should also work on this topic further to understand us more. Thank you.
Yeah, probably you want to react to this comment about oversimplification.
Well, I just wanted to say yes. Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Because, for example, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Crimean Tatars that are now, at this moment, are fighting Russia as a part of Ukrainian army. And as far as I know, there are 2 carried people who fight against Russia, but we cannot say their names. Their families can be in danger, but we can be proud that 2 people is a lot. Well, it may not sound as a lot, but just so you understand, I hope there's at least, like tops 800 people in Ukraine right now of carried descent. So when you have of your whole nationality in Ukraine like 800 people, 2 people fighting in a war is a lot. And maybe I will eventually, who knows? And it will be 3. But yeah, I don't like this. I don't like these comments from Ukrainians who say, "Well, what did Crimean Tatar do to get Crimea back?" They do. We cannot say that. We cannot say their names, but we know some names. We know Isa Akayev, who's the chief commander of Crimean battalion. We know the hero of Azovstal. He was paramedic. Well, he's still paramedic. Asan Isinajiv is a Crimean Tatar as well. So there are some heroes, and they do the same thing that all the Ukrainians do for Ukraine and for Crimea, because it's our home.
May I add something? Yes, because now I'm working on the book about Crimean political prisoners, mostly Crimean Tatars, and like to the question, what do Crimean Tatars to resist? I would say like they try to resist. They like those people who try to express their opinion to resist this system. They are now in prison. So it's like it's not normal for me to say to hear that some people say, what do they do to resist this system? They are now in prison, in Russian prison, and they have this those sentences, 18 years. 11 years and more. So I think it's enough. Yeah, thank you.
Yes,
I was looking for the name of a filmmaker and Crimean that was arrested and is now in the army. I interviewed him in Lviv, in Kiev, but I cannot remember his name. But
Oleg Sentsov.
There you go. Yeah. So yeah, he was very committed.
Yeah, but he's not ethnical Crimean Tatar. He's Ukrainian.
He's Ukrainian?
Yeah, but he's from Crimea. He was born there. He was raised there, so he loves Crimea, and he's a part of Crimean community.
He said he was an activist there against the forces, and so he was arrested.
He's strongly pro-Ukrainian. He's very pro-Ukrainian. We love that guy.
Okay.
So we have like even less than 7 minutes left, and I'd like you to reflect on a very general question. Probably the answer would be yes, in short, but probably you'd like to reflect a little bit more about it. So can an outsider write a story about somebody else to conclude our today's panel? So is it because there are lots of discussions going on that only a person who has the same lived experience, the same identity, the same shared experience can actually write and convey the experience of other people. At the same time, it not always works because, well, shall be frank, but not all people good writers or good presenters or whatever. So the question is, can an outsider write a story about somebody else? And then the second question is, why do we need those stories? Why do we need those additional stories?
Perhaps not as truthfully as a Ukrainian would. I realize that completely. But also probably a Ukrainian would not be able to write in Portuguese, maybe. So if you would only have to find the Ukrainian people that migrated to Portugal with their parents and they are now speaking exactly the same Portuguese that I speak, you would have to want them to become reporters and then come to Ukraine and write in Portuguese language. And that's, I don't know if there's one person that I know, Irina Shev, she's now working for one of our TV stations, which belongs to the paper that I also work for. She moved when she was 7 to Portugal, and now in August last year, she came back to Ukraine to devote herself to reporting on a country that is also her country. But that's a very rare case. So if you want to bring Ukrainian stories to a Portuguese audience, I believe we are useful. I know English, French, anything. But I think that we're always fall short, you know, a bit, because how can I understand deeply your culture or you mine if not, you know, raised there? When I read stories about Portugal, you know, when we have elections, the New York Times goes there or Political goes there, I always have this thing of like, oh, come on, this is such a generalization. It's not really that everyone thinks this. So I imagine that Ukrainians in Portugal reading my stories will also be like, yeah, that was a bit of you were a bit lazy there. You could have gone, you know, a bit further. But I think mostly I'm concerned about not deepening stereotypes. And you can only do that reading quite a lot and speaking to as many Ukrainians as you can, even if you're not publishing anything. It doesn't matter. Just on coffee shops or I don't know, everywhere. You don't need to be looking for a super dramatic story all the time. You might just be speaking to anyone that will give you an idea of how people think. You might not quote them, but it's just a mother taking kids to school. So just speaking to as many people as you can, and not just with the intention of publishing, you know. I think that's quite important. So yeah, I think an outsider can, with some, you know, some problems. And your second question is whether it is important or, yeah.
Why do we need those stories?
I think it's important that sometimes outsiders also teach you a bit about yourselves, or at least how people outside look at yourselves. So yeah, I think it's important.
I would like to add that I really appreciate your involvement to this topic, because I'm sure that it's really it's significant to have those like European voices, I would say, like those people, those journalists, authors, which are who are coming to Ukraine and trying to explain Ukraine more for European audience and like Western audience or in general, regarding this second question about the outsiders, I wasn't considering myself as an outsider in general. But as I said before, yes, of course, maybe there are some obstacles, some barriers, but I try to overcome those barriers and to learn more about culture, about religion, about a language. And why those stories are important till now, because I think that our society is changing. The narrative about our society are changing, and I wouldn't say that this topic is discovered in the full form. So we need to discover more, and I'm trying to do this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Esra?
My answer will be short. Yes, but respectfully. Maybe go get some help from the insider. That would be great. Why is it important? Because we need help outside. We need all the help we can get in the world, because Russian propaganda in the world works great. It works perfectly, because even it sometimes works inside of Ukraine. We have big problems with our propaganda. We have to add to our team as much as possible. We have to collaborate with as many as possible of international journalists. We have to propagate Ukraine. We have to propagate Ukrainian agenda. We have to propagate our point of view, because our point of view is justice. A Russian point of view is awful. It's just death. Essentially, so we have to fight it back, and of course we'll need some help across the world.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for this essential toolkit in the end, how to write stories. That's very important. And I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists for this insightful conversation and for our listeners for keenly listening to us despite the sun heat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much. All these applauses for you. Трошки гучніше, я не чую там гальорочку. Дякую, дякую, дякую вам величезне.